Okay, so I've clicked live on the YouTube. We'll just wait for the 15 seconds just to check that people can hear us. It's a 15-second delay between the Zoom. That looks as if it's working. If anyone on the YouTube, please let us know if there's any audio problems. The visuals look good. Okay, so this is a Socratic seminar organized by London Bit Devs. We had a few in the past. We had a couple on Bit Schnorr and Bit Taproot that were really good. Peter Willer and Russell O'Connor and various other people joined those. So videos for that and transcripts are up for that. I'm just going to let someone up onto the call. Oh, that's great. AJ's joined. So for those, there's not for people watching on the YouTube, if you want to join the Zoom call, the Zoom link is on the meetup page. So feel free to join the Zoom call if you want to join. So for those who haven't attended the Socratic seminar before, like this isn't a presentation. Calais is on the call, which is great. But this isn't a presentation from Calais, this is a discussion. We've got a reading list up that I've shared in various places on Twitter and on the YouTube. So we'll be going through those links, and that'll be the structure of the discussion. We'll start off from basics. So certainly anybody on the call, I don't know if Kabuchi is a beginner or not, but like we'll start from basics. So certainly early on is a great time for people who don't know too much about Signet to participate. It'll get more technical. We'll go into the implementation details later. And we are live streaming on the YouTube. I haven't seen anybody comment, but hopefully there aren't any problems. Yeah, questions, comments on the YouTube. Feel free to also join the call. We'll be monitoring the Twitter, LDN Bitcoin Devs, and IRC, hashtag LDN Bitcoin Devs on IRC. Okay, so the topic today is Signet. As I said, Calais is here, which is great. Knows more about Signet than certainly probably anybody else on the planet, probably. And like it. And what's that?
Oh, AJ is starting to like zoom away from me. I'm starting to like, wait, what are you doing now? But yeah. Anyway, yeah. Sorry, you were cutting
frozen, Calais.
Oh.
So let's do. So we start off with intros. We'll start off with you, Calais. Hopefully, MZ, Shu, and AJ who are on the call can do intros, and just so we can check the audio is working and things. So Calais, can you do an intro and talk about like what you've been working on in terms of Signet for the last couple of years?
Okay. So I'm. Let me know if I'm freezing up and stuff. I'm in the downstairs room and the Wi-Fi is upstairs. I may have to move upstairs, but if not, no. Just let me know.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm Kala. I'm living in Tokyo right now. I'm working for DG Lab. DG Lab, which is and well, I'm doing mostly Bitcoin Core related things. Also working on a debugger for Bitcoin Core called BTC Deb. And recently, the last, I don't know, few years, Signet has been my top priority. So yeah, I'm excited. It's moving forward now. And finally, I'm hoping to get Signet in place right in time for Taproot. So if we can get those two in, install up a Signet with Taproot, or add Taproot to Signet, that would be cool. Anyway, so yeah, that's me.
Cool, thanks, Calais. If I'll let you know if there are any sound problems. Sometimes it works if you turn the video off, but we'll keep the video on for now as long as there's no sound problems. Okay. Other people who are on the call. MZ, do you want to do an intro? And whether you've looked into Signet?
Hello. I only heard about Signet, but I tried to use Testnet for something, and I see that we need a Signet because Testnet mostly has so many problems, and you mostly can't use it really. Oh, it's annoying. Yeah.
Cool. AJ, are you there?
Hey, howdy.
Hey. Can you do a
guess-
brief intro and talk about what you've done on Signet for the last couple of years?
Sure. I have previously been working at Zappo, and I'm now at Paradigm. Both cases just working on random Bitcoin Core stuff. I've been involved in the Taproot stuff for a while now, and I kind of agree that testnet's terrible, and really want to see some sort of live way of playing with new soft forks and consensus rules before we deploy them. So Signet sounds awesome. So I've been looking at that the last, I don't know, month or two, I guess, kind of with some seriousness.
Cool. Thanks, AJ. And Shu, do you want to do an intro? You don't have to. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, I'm not seeing any movement. You're muted, Stu, at the moment, and I can't hear you. Okay. And then someone's just joined, Yuko. We're just doing intros at the moment. Do you want to do an intro? You don't have to. You're currently muted.
Thank you very much. Hello, hi. I may need to I think I will need to like join as a participant only, like audience. Should I go to the YouTube stream then?
It's completely up to you. Yeah, you feel free to do either. If you don't want to participate on the call, then yeah, you can just watch the YouTube. And we'll be monitoring for comments and questions there.
Okay, all right.
Feel free to stay on the call and just listen, because there's not too many people on the call. We won't have any performance issues.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay,
No
this
problem.
is Bank of Japan, the London. So I think I will switch over to YouTube. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. So as I said earlier, we'll start off with just basics and just exploring what Testnet and Regtest offer, and some of the problems and why there was a motivation for Signet in the first place. On that reading list, the first link I had, I'm going to try and share my screen, was just a good section on Andreas Antonopoulos' Mastering Bitcoin book on Testnet.
Do you have the list again? I kind of
yeah. I'll share it in the comments, can I?
Yeah, thank you.
That's the link to the reading list for the people on the call. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so for the people on the call, you should be able to see that. This is part of Andreas's book. Okay, so just starting absolutely from first principles, maybe into Signet less than some Calais and AJ. And did you want to talk about what Testnet is? Why do we have Testnet? What do people use Testnet for? Why was it started in the first place? Why was it set up in the first place?
Me or AJ?
Do you want to take that, MC? You're currently muted.
Oh, me.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, yeah. Testnet. Yeah. It's like I can talk where I used it. I used it for in the beginning to test out Lightning, because you don't want to do that with all the first implementations of all the Lightning clients or software nodes. Just use Testnet, and I think that's one example to simply use something that has no value and try out the whole system. So I think that's the purpose for the Testnet. You simply has many people using it, and you can, without any value, try out things. Yeah.
Cool. Any advances on that, Kalle or AJ?
No, sounds good.
So advances on that. So if you're building an application and you want to test it and you don't want to have real money on the line, that would be one use case. Certainly, and we'll get into some of the problems with Testnet, but certainly if you're trying out new mining hardware or something, this can really impact the experience of other people's application testing on Testnet, because then the difficulty of mining blocks goes sky high, etc. And so the interaction in terms of testing certain applications does screw up the testing of other applications on Testnet. And we'll go into that in more detail. But in terms of how Testnet works, again, we'll go to UMZ and then we'll lead on Kalle and AJ later, as the call goes on. How are blocks mined on Testnet? What's the difference between mining blocks on Testnet versus mining blocks on mainnet?
What's the difference? I'm not that good prepared, but I think there is not directly a difference. I think there was a improvement because the difficulty was really ramping up, and then so somebody started and the difficulty ramped up, and then they stopped mining, and then the difficulty was high and no new blocks were found. So I think there is something changed on the mining side for the difficulty adjustment. But other than that, it should be pretty much the same as mainnet.
Right, I think that's right. It's any additions on that, Kalle? So there was the adjustment with Testnet 3, right? So that because there was the problem that there'd be loads of hashing power going on board, and then that would mean that once that hash power left, it would be like the block generation time was really, really long. And so there was that change for Testnet 3.12, where if a block hadn't been found after a certain time, the difficulty would just plummet down to the absolutely lowest possible. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure myself. I haven't really done a lot of mining on Testnet, but from what I understand, yeah, if a block hasn't been seen for a while, the difficulty drops, which has some issues, but I'm sure you'll get there. So I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah, we will get onto that part. So there's a few other differences. So it's different DNS seeds. So in terms of like trying to find other nodes, obviously the DNS seeds are different on Testnet than they are on mainnet. I think MZ is a DNS seed on mainnet. You're not a DNS seed on Testnet, I'm assuming. MZ.
I don't know. I think there are.
Okay.
Yeah. There are about like half of them from mainnet are also running Testnet nodes. I'm not running a Testnet because I think it's not that important.
Okay, and obviously the port needs to be different. There's a minimum difficulty that we've kind of gone over, and then you can do transactions with non-standard scripts. Again, we'll leave that till later because there's kind of that discussion on Signet whether you should be able to experiment with scripts that you can't on mainnet on, say, Testnet, Regtest, Signet. And then that final one on this Testnet wiki is that it's a different Genesis block to the main network. And that there was a new Genesis block, and this was reset for the 0.7 Bitcoin release. Okay, so moving on. So some of the problems with Testnet. This was a crazy example. I don't exactly know how this happened, but apparently there were 16,000 blocks found in a day. Does somebody on the call want to talk about why this is a problem?
Well, I'm not sure if this is a case of a reorg. I'm assuming it is, but I don't know. Well, I know that, well, okay, so probably there was a lot of lag between the last blocks and the difficulty dropped down really far down. And then they just put a miner on it and then it just went, haywire on the blocks because of the minimum difficulty. Because that's a problem if you go back and reorg purposefully, you can get the same result because older blocks, if they were seen as if they were the last block on the chain, then you would still get this difficulty drop from those based on today. So you could go back and get lower difficulty and mine more blocks than you could if you just mined on the top of the chain.
So there's kind of two issues with this. There's the issue of just too many blocks coming through. Like depending on your application, exactly what you're testing. Let's say you're testing, I don't know, like a new opcode or something. Like this maybe not be a big issue, but it's just crazy that you're getting so many confirmations through in such a rush. But there's the two issues. One is generation times are just so volatile and so variable. And as Kalle also said, you also get reorgs. So if you're testing a transaction that you think has 5 confirmations and then there's a massive reorg and the transaction drops out because it was in a block that is now discarded from a reorg, that's also a problem. But it's kind of very dependent on exactly what you're testing, right? Like if you're testing new mining hardware, you're testing like a change to Bitcoin Core mining or Bitcoin Core P2P, that's very different to testing just like a new script, like a non-standard script, where perhaps you don't care about confirmation times, you don't care about reorgs as much. Any advances on that? Anybody on the call? No? Okay, so we'll move on. So this is, so my understanding of why Testnet was reset back in 2012, so this was Testnet to Testnet 3. My understanding was one of the big problems was that people were actually selling their testnet for real monetary value, right? Yeah. Like was it just that there was such a dearth of like testnet faucets and just people just couldn't get their hands on them to do testing? Why did testnet coins suddenly get a value at that point in time? Anybody know? No?
Yeah.
It's totally before my time, so I've got no idea. But I thought the idea was more that you'd reset testnet just to make sure it was easy to sync with in the first place and didn't have this years-long history of transactions that nobody ever really cares about anymore. But yeah, I agree the wiki suggests that someone was paying for it.
Yeah. Specifically what I heard was it was reset twice because both times someone started selling them and they were like, no, and then they reset. That's what I heard anyway. It could be. But I haven't seen why anyone would buy coins like that. I don't know.
Okay, and we can only speculate, I suppose. It might just be like pure stupidity or just like having no idea that the testnet coins weren't actually like, I don't know, real Bitcoin or not an altcoin or something. So that was one of the motivations for resetting it back in 2012. As AJ says, like block sync time, we'll get onto that in a few links in terms of like whether testnet should be big and whether it should take a long time to sync testnet. Were there any other problems why it was reset? So there does seem to be, I was reading, there does seem to be a problem, like because there's like non-standard scripts enabled, that like it doesn't, every so often it does, after a certain period of time, it does get very, very messy, right? And so sometimes you do need a reset just because people are struggling to sync the chain, or like there's rule changes and people are actually struggling to get to that latest blockchain tip during the time it takes, they're just physically unable to sync up to the latest block. Is that correct?
So I just tested syncing the testnet 3, and it was really fast without any problems. So yeah, but I think really the problem is if you don't reset it, if there is no precedent that's that it was resetted, then I can see it's like any other altcoin, so it can get value if you don't reset it. So maybe now it's once or twice resetted, then it's sure that it doesn't get any value.
So in this Bitcoin Stack Exchange thing that I've shared on the call and should be on the YouTube as well, there's this comment: the main reason for the reset is to get a more sane test network. With the BIP16 and BIP13 testnet difficulty, blockchain rule changes, the old testnet is a mess, with old clients serving up different incompatible chains. So I don't know whether that's just like people not maintaining or not keeping up to date with the latest Bitcoin core changes, but there does seem to be a bigger problem than just purely sync time or like IBD time. And it does appear that there needs to be some reset every so often just to get rid of some of these issues that have been collecting up over time on the testnet. Any additions on that? I don't think people have thought too much on testnet, but I don't know if there's any lessons to be learned from some of these resets and whether Signets will need similar resets in time. No additions on that?
I mean, testnet is like, if you want to make sure that your node that you wrote in JavaScript can, execute everything properly, and you can go through all the testnet 3 stuff and find all these weird scripts that are trying to break it and do stuff with, it's a resource for that reason, I think, as a way to just like, try out weird stuff that people have done because it's testnet and it's worth nothing. On mainnet, you wouldn't really be experimental, whereas in a test network, you would, you could do all these things. And I know at least when Nicola Doria was writing he was writing a full node in C#, and he used testnet to make sure that it worked. I mean, both testnet and mainnet, of course. So, I mean, there's that.
Okay, thanks. So then I didn't know whether to go on to this point now or after we've actually discussed what Signet is, but like there has been various points, given that it's been so long since we've reset the testnet. We haven't reset the testnet since 2012. There's been various discussion pop up at various points about whether there should be a testnet reset. And I've thought about it, and I was thinking like, perhaps we don't want to reset the testnet until we've worked out like how effective Signet is and like whether Signet solves all the problems. Because if it does solve all the problems, then it doesn't really matter. But like if we were to reset testnet, say tomorrow, and everyone just moved to testnet, and there wouldn't be any problems because obviously it was reset. So you're not inheriting all the problems of years of testnet, then perhaps people wouldn't be using Signet. And so maybe we do need a testnet reset, but we should do it once we've worked out whether Signet solves all our testing needs. Would you agree with that? Not hearing any responses.
I don't really think a reset would make testnet all that much more useful for, like, one of the things that it's not useful, one of the things that stops it being useful for testing Lightning is that you do get these huge variations in number of blocks per hour or day. So the lock time restrictions that Lightning uses to make sure that you have time to be able to publish your revocation or whatever transactions and punish people for doing the wrong thing, that you've got actual time for that. But if thousands of blocks get found in a minute, then you don't have time for that. And likewise, if there's huge reorgs. So, and I mean, a reset won't fix that. So even if it was reset tomorrow and worked fine for what it is, I still think that that leaves Signet as a useful sort of thing to have.
Yeah, like a testnet reset is certainly not going to mean that Signet isn't required. But like there's certain, like Lightning is obviously a case where Signet is going to be clearly miles better than testnet, as for the reasons you just said, AJ. But for like a testing use case such as like, I don't know, testing a new ASIC or testing IBD or testing P2P stuff, like perhaps you do want like the craziness that happens on testnet, and just to like stress test your ASIC or stress test the latest IBD change in a way that perhaps it would be difficult to replicate that craziness on Signet.
So for testing an ASIC, then Signet's not all that useful because you've got to do the signing as well as the proof of work. So you've got a whole different setup than you'd have for mainnet for that. Whereas testnet's almost exactly the same. So just point an ASIC at it and you're fine. I don't know how much the craziness is useful for anything realistic you're testing, like putting craziness in a Regtest thing so that you can just have a couple of hundred blocks that demonstrates the craziness and put it in a functional test and have it run on every commit seems a lot better than having to sync testnet and run it against that for changes that you might make.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
But that is an argument for resetting testnet, right? Because for those testing use cases, such as testing a new ASIC or whatever.
I know
yeah, I mean,
like
at the moment, you have to go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
We'll go you, AJ, first. I think Calais letting you go first, AJ, and then we'll go back to Calais.
Okay. So if you want to test an ASIC against testnet, you've got to sync it first, and if maybe you get bored of it and don't sync it all the way, then you risk doing a reorg, which then interferes with everyone else. So, I mean, there's an argument on its own for maybe resetting testnet every 2 years or like on a schedule rather than every 8 years or 10 years or whatever like that. But I don't know that that's a really strong argument.
I'm not quite sure what you're saying, AJ. Are you saying like it should be regular every 2-3 years, or are you saying like it's not needed at all?
I don't think it's needed at all. I mean, if you run a testnet node and once you get your new ASIC, you point it at your testnet node and you're instantly mining new testnet blocks. So like, I don't think you need to do anything special to support that use case. But if you wanted to make it so that you just go from scratch, plug in your new Raspberry Pi to run your testnet node, plug in your new ASIC and have it all working in 20 minutes, then that's an argument for having it reset maybe.
And Calais, anything to add to that?
Yeah, honestly, I still don't even know why testnet would exist if Signet exists, to be honest. Because like if you have an ASIC and you want to try it out, why don't you, try to get money? Why don't you point it at mainnet? I don't see why you wouldn't do that. Like, I mean, I don't think you're gonna break mainnet if you try out your new ASIC on mainnet.
Or just like you're testing like the firmware and you want to make sure that it's working properly before you like direct loads of hash power towards the main chain.
Yeah, maybe. I would just try it on mainnet myself probably, but
I see what you mean. Like there's nothing really to lose. Like not much to lose.
I mined a block. On that. Oh no.
If in that use case, there's not. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. But then there are other use cases such as like, I don't know, changes to like Bitcoin Core mining code or Bitcoin Core P2P code. If you want to test changes to that before pushing them out on mainnet, like, does it make sense that there's a completely open, crazy, chaotic, like, staging grounds to test it first before you start pushing it out to
I mean,
users?
yeah, I guess. I mean, if you were, but like, so yeah, if you have a mining software, you want to try it first, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, maybe if you want to try to solo mining, then it's way too hard to do that on the mainnet, or maybe
That's true, yeah.
you're doing some pool, trying out some pool software for pool mining, and you really want to try to find a few blocks, and that's for sure much easier on testnet.
Well, you can start a new custom Signet. You can mine there. Well, I mean, I guess you do have to make the signatures,
sure.
like Anthony's saying. Yeah.
But like, it's going to be very hard to simulate that craziness on Signet. Like, the whole point of Signet is that you're trying to prevent that craziness, and so you're putting, and we'll get on to Signet, but you're putting constraints in there so that that craziness doesn't happen. If you actually want that craziness, I don't know how much sense it would make to try and simulate that craziness either on like your Signet or to start a new Signet with craziness on it.
Right.
Anything more on Testnet? I think that was all my links. Like Nicholas Dorier says, Testnet should be replaced by a Signet. So
yeah,
Nicholas is in your camp, Karen. Doesn't see the need for a new Testnet. You did say on this, like, the Testnet version 1 and 2, we don't know if they're syncable anymore. Like, at some point, Testnet v3 probably. Data? I don't know.
Yeah.
But at some point, you would assume Testnet v3 won't be syncable anymore for the same issues that v1 and v2 had. So, like, if there are any use cases, then we should think about a Testnet v4.
Yeah, I mean, but I think the link you showed where there were issues and clients were giving different, chains. I mean, that would be a reason to reset, but I don't think we see that in Testnet 3 at this point. I don't think Testnet 3 is giving different chains for different clients right now.
It was giving Testnet 3 was giving different chains at a point when some of the miners were trying out one of the block size increase bips. So some of the miners mined with the, I don't know, whichever bit it was to lock it in, and then still on that chain, someone else mined a too small block or something that was invalid, and I think a whole bunch of those nodes got stalled.
Oh.
And I think there was some sort of reorg that avoided that at some point. I'm not really sure. But for a while, there were definitely two chains on Testnet.
Yeah.
I mean, I would guess that, like, if you're allowing more functionality on Testnet and you're not going through the same rigor and the same processes that you do on mainnet in terms of, like, soft forks and discussing Taproot soft fork for years, I would think, like, as you've got more freedom and more flexibility, that there are going to be those problems, especially if you start reverting, making things more restrictive and then allowing things that aren't mainnet. And I haven't really followed Testnet closely, so I don't know whether there has been like that.
I think I synced
lots of changes
one time, like several years ago, and then I couldn't figure out how to get any coins, and I was like, so what did I do now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think too many people are monitoring it, like, for obvious reasons, because it has no value, and it's like, yeah, most people are focusing on mainnet.
Yeah.
I think there was one last thing I wanted to cover before we move on from Testnet, which is so Peter Todd back in 2018, when they were discussing a reset of Testnet, put forward the view that testnet should be a large blockchain. So that motivation that AJ said earlier about wanting to reset testnet just because it gets too big and it's too long to sync up and IBD takes long. Peter saying in this mailing list post that you actually want it to be like similar size to mainnet, if not bigger, because you want to see, like, let's say the like block size, block weight discussion starts up again in 5 years, or you want to know like what's possible before there starts to be performance issues across the network. Perhaps you do want testnet to be really big for those use cases, just to experiment with a massive chain prior to thinking about whether we should make block sizes smaller or bigger or whatever. Any thoughts on that?
I agree with Peter.
So yeah, perhaps that's an argument for not doing a reset, or at least doing a reset but with a massive chain included in that reset. I don't know. Okay.
I mean,
yeah, go for it.
Makes sense to me to a point, but for like if you're just wanting to test random wallet and application software, I don't think you want to download an even bigger chain than mainnet to have to do that. Like not when we're having problems with the IBD performance of mainnet in the first place. Like I thought some of the experiments they did with Bcash with their giga mega blocks or whatever makes more sense there, where you just have like some separate offline test to check that performance rather than inflicting it on everyone before it's ready.
This is where perhaps like some of these use cases would make sense to be on Signet, and then you just leave testnet for that experimentation for like massive chains and long IBDs and all sorts of P2P issues. Maybe you leave testnet for those use cases, and all the use cases where, such as the wallet use case you put forward, AJ, you'd use Signet for that. Like I'm certainly not saying like testnet fulfills everything that Signet can do. Like Signet is going to be better in the vast majority of cases. It's just whether we need that testnet, whether we need a testnet reset, and what applications or what use cases are going to be tested on it in future. But we'll move on from testnet unless anyone has any final thoughts on testnet, and go on to Regtest. Any final thoughts on testnet?
I mean, I mentioned it before when we talked about it. I think there's an incentive misalignment with, you know, miners mining on testnet. They are mining, but there's really no reason for them to mine. They're wasting energy and wasting money for electricity bills to create blocks that are supposed to be, you know, worth nothing. So I think that Signet will solve that problem. Like, I mean, people who want to mine testnet coins for whatever reason, I met several of them. They've been very concerned when I mentioned Signet because they think that testnet's going to go away, but it's not going to go away. If miners mine testnet, it's going to stay there. And even if I wanted to remove testnet, I couldn't remove testnet. So by the very nature of how it's set up. So, but yeah, that's my thoughts on testnet.
Okay, cool. So let's move on to Regtest then. We'll go to you, MZ, first. What do you know about Regtest? How is it different to testnet? How does it work? We'll start off with you, MZ, and then we'll go to Cal and AJ.
Yeah, it's like simply you starting you just say your BTC server to mine a block. So there's no proof of work. There's no. Most of the time, I think you run it without any network connection. So you simply type in a command and get a block, or get 100 blocks, or whatever you need for your test case. So it's not like a network. It's more like you're doing it on your own node. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that, NC. Any additions on that, AJ?
It's like a fancy unit testing network, regression tests. You can't use it with people, but it's perfect for using on your own computer and try stuff out.
Right. So it's you're not setting up a network beyond probably your own machine, right? So you're not testing for some of those use cases we're thinking about in terms of like mining or different ASICs competing with each other or P2P stuff. Like for those types of things, you're just not able to test them on Regtest. Regtest is good for small changes that aren't network level changes. They're just small things you want to experiment with locally.
I mean, like Taproot is a great example, I think. It's you can create your own little, you can create an address and spend it to yourself and all that stuff on Regtest, perfectly fine. But like having interactions between multiple people and bigger interactions are probably harder to do on Regtest, I think. And Signet will help.
Cool. So let's go back to the links. So this item on the reading list was, this is really good. I think this is still online. Richard Bondi did a Regtest workshop at Austin Bitcoin Devs. And this was just getting set up on your laptop, generating blocks. Obviously, there's no proof of work, so you can just do generate commands to produce a block and to get the block reward. Don't need any hash power to generate a block. There's no competition. Any other differences between Regtest and Testnet? In terms of the Genesis block, like, does it have the same Genesis block as Testnet, or like, is there just an empty Genesis block? They're different. Okay.
Yeah.
Thinking of what other differences there are. Okay. So anyway, I'd recommend that. That's a really good workshop if you want to just play around with Regtest and do small changes locally. There's also a tutorial from BISC. So there was this PR that Jay Timon opened back in 2019 in terms of making Regtest fully customizable. So this is kind of moving into Signet territory. And I think you commented, Calais, on why this isn't a good idea. Just trying to find your comment. But it was like, it's not the security of opening up Regtest to external nodes is not the same security as you'd get in terms of opening nodes up to external nodes on a Signet network. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, if you look at, yeah, sorry. Okay.
No, sorry, go for it. Okay.
Oh, I mean, I have very little experience with all of the altcoins out there, but like one of the big problems I've noticed when I looked at one was that they have like miners are automating mining all lowest difficulty chains all the time. So you have an altcoin which has a value, and then you will have miners come in regularly and mine a ton and get the difficulty up to whatever value they would have, would economically unviable for them, and then they would move on to the next altcoin. So I think if you had a Regtest with mining and stuff without some kind of other, security check or like the signature in Signet, then I think that you would have that problem there as well, griefing and whatever.
So it's a mining issue. I mean, your quote here, Calais, is you can in practice start up a Regtest and add node, like the command add node, people all over the world to create a network. That would be completely vulnerable.
Yeah.
Like, are there any additional like P2P security stuff you'd have to worry about if you were to open up a Regtest to external nodes? Is there anything that Signet offers other than the?
Oh, well, I mean, like I can take your.
Multiple Regtest?
Sorry, what? You were cutting.
Go for it, Kalle. I think sometimes there's a delay, but go for
okay.
it.
Well, I mean, I can do a one-line thing where I delete your entire chain for you on your Regtest chain. You know, I can just erase it anytime I want. I just invalidate your block 1, and then I just mine a bunch of Regtest blocks until until my chain is bigger than yours, and then you're gonna switch over to mine. So you have to invalidate my block, and then you may go back to yours, and you're gonna have this like back and forth thing going on because I can make blocks for free.
Okay, so that's different to how I thought it worked. I kind of thought it was like immutable in terms of like once you'd generated a block, like that was a block in the chain. No. Like, so how do you have a reorg on Regtest, or how do you ditch a block that someone's generated?
You just
type proof of work.
You just type invalidate block and the block hash and hit enter. And then Beacon Core will throw that away and all of the other blocks after it. So if you generate a block after doing that, you're going to generate the block on the block before it. So if I invalidate block 1 in your chain, then my node will mine on top of the Genesis block, mine the first block and then the second, third, fourth. So if you have 100 blocks and I mine 101 blocks, your chain is going to see my 101 blocks. Say, oh, this is a longer chain. Let's go there. Okay,
that is a massive problem.
That
is something I didn't realize. Okay, that is probably the strongest motivation I've heard for Signet, and I'm already convinced of the concept. Okay. So anything else on Regtest? So just before we move on for Regtest and actually start on Signet, so how was this? Do you remember how this PR worked in terms of making Regtest fully customizable? Like, is Jay Timon introducing proof of work or what?
He's had multiple versions of this, I think. He was actually working kind of alongside me when I was doing Signet in the beginning. He was an Elements developer, the Blockstream project. And so I think that he did work to put my Signet stuff into the Elements stuff and stuff. So I think this is actually the one that he did after I did Signet. But yeah, he's talking about Signets, yeah. So I think his idea was that instead of having Signet as a set of parameters with a hard-coded network, you would just use Regtest and you customize it to say, yeah, we need a signature for the block to be valid and do these things. I think ultimately it was a lot of code for something that didn't seem like we were going to use a whole lot. I don't know.
I suppose it depends, and we'll get onto this in the Signet section. It depends whether it's like one Signet that everyone uses and like as a slot in replacement for Testnet, or whether there's multiple Signets. Because if there was to be only one Signet, then maybe it makes sense to like try and experiment with like different types of customizable Regtest, because that one Signet doesn't satisfy everyone's needs or desires in terms of how it's set up.
I mean, like at one point I was suggesting that it's very easy for like, if say you make check template verify, Jeremy Rubin's code, his idea, and then you make a pull request to Beacon Core for this new feature, and then you also change the Signet default values to be a new custom Signet that you've made, which enables the check template verify code. And if you do that, then people who download your pull request from Beacon Core and compile it and run with just minus Signet, they will immediately be on your custom chain. No changes done. They don't need to do any customization at all. They're just on your chain. And they can now try check template verify stuff, and they will validate it, and they will do all these things that the core node would do normally. But I think people are against that idea a little. People would rather have like one Signet with all bells and whistles turned on, and then people can pick which software they want to use. So, but anyway, yeah. So, I mean, I think the Jorge J. Timon, I think his idea is kind of, it's in the same vein, but I think his idea was a bit complex, more complex than what he provided, I think.
Okay, cool. There is a question on YouTube. Lucas asks, wouldn't the diff be way lower on testnet, allowing you to test if your software can indeed find a block? Oh, the difficulty. Well, in comparison to mainnet, that's obviously the case, right? Because there's no value on testnet, the difficulty is obviously going to be lower. It's just that it varies hugely. But at a
or you
much
can join a
lower
pool,
base.
you know. If you join a pool, even if you have, you know, a relatively low difficulty, you're still going to get, you know, you're going to get shares with your miner, and if it's working correctly. And if you get shares, you can, you know, you're going to get money. So you can do that, or you can use testnet. I mean, if you want money, if you don't want money, I mean.
Yeah, this is a discussion point earlier. Like, there's nothing. If you're the worst case is you're mining software on mainnet. You're mining hardware. Your ASIC doesn't work and you don't get anything.
Yeah.
Right. But that's exactly the same case as if you were mining on testnet.
Yeah.
So you might as well just throw it on mainnet, and even if it doesn't work, well, you're not losing anything from not being on testnet.
Right.
So yeah, that's what we were discussing earlier. But thanks for the question, Lucas. Questions, comments, keep them coming on the YouTube. So let's move on to Signet. We've had almost an hour without discussing what Signet is. So Signet, let's go to MZ again. What do you know about Signet? How Signet works? Yeah, give us an introduction to Signet of as much as you can, MZ.
Yeah, I only heard about it, and as far as I know, it's just that instead of mining, you sign the blocks. But other than that, I don't know how it works.
Okay. So I'm just gonna. There was a couple of good quotes that I put on the reading list from Bitcoin Optex. I'm just gonna read them out, and then anything else that we haven't covered, Calais, will go to you. I'll just share my screen again. So on the Bitcoin Optex Signet topics page, Signet protocol allows creating testnets where all valid new blocks must be signed by that is Optex. Must be signed by a centralized party. Although the centralization is antithetical to Bitcoin, it's ideal for a testnet because testnets. Where testers sometimes want to create a disruptive scenario, such as a chain reorg, and other times just want a stable platform to use for testing software interoperation. On Bitcoin's existing testnet, reorgs and other disruptions can occur frequently and for prolonged lengths of time, making regular testing impractical. The operators of the Signet can control the rate of block production and the frequency and magnitude of blockchain reorgs. Yeah, this avoids commonly encountered problems on testnets such as too fast block production, too slow block production, reorgs involving thousands of blocks. Okay, so into any other like high-level things in terms of how Signet works, Calais? Like, you've still got the proof of work, but you can only successfully mine a block if it's signed by, I think it's just you at the moment, or is it currently set up to be a 1 of 2 between you and AJ?
It's me and AJ right now, yeah. As of, I think, 2 days ago.
Okay. So that means that if I mine a block at the latest difficulty, I need to send that block to either you or AJ to provide a signature before it can go on the chain, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So there's no way of like you or AJ or both giving your signature in advance for someone to start mining. It's going to be a like, Calais, I've got a new block. Okay, I'll sign it. Calais, I've got a new block. I'll sign it. It's not a, Calais, can I be a miner, please? And then Calais goes, okay, fine. Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I have to. The signature commits to the block itself, so you have to have the block before you can create the signature.
Okay. Cool. So then let's go through some of your links, Kalle. This is the announcement on the dev list. Okay, maybe let's have this discussion then on whether like having one signet which everyone uses, or having multiple signets. So the problem that I foresee, that if there's just one, is that then you get into the same issue that you do on mainnet, where it's like, well, I want my change on Signet, right? So like, I don't know, Jeremy Rubin comes and says, I want check template verify, and you go, right, fine. And then someone else comes along with a change that no one's particularly interested in, or everyone thinks is a bad idea, but it's like, I want this on Signet. And so then you're kind of in the same situation that we are on mainnet, where it's very hard to get new features on the Signet, and it kind of needs, at least with you and AJ as the signers, it kind of needs you or AJ to sign off that that change is worthy of experimentation on Signet. Would you agree that that's like one of the downsides to having one Signet that everybody uses? Okay. Any other downsides to having one Signet?
I mean, I thought your example of the have a really huge test net so that we can test how things work when we've got way too much data. I mean, that's the perfect example of why you want something, a completely specialized chain that some people use for their purposes, but most people don't want to use because it's just too big for no good reason. So, I mean, the code, the way Signet's implemented as is, lets people do custom ones, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you certainly want to allow people to do it. It's just maybe it'll end up that there's like one main Signet, sorry, main's the wrong word, but like one Signet that everyone uses most of the time. And then if you want to go off and do something crazy that most of the network isn't interested in, then you do your own Signet. So you'll have like one with a network effect and lots of other splintered, fragmented Signets.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's the default one. I call it the default Signet. I don't know.
Okay, default Signet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you don't provide a custom block signing script or anything, then yeah. But I think like there's something you can do with, even if you only have one. I know you were talking about the downsides of having one, but like your example of Jeremy Rubin's check template verify and Taproot, like I could see how Signet, the default Signet, would have both of those turned on, and people who were running could pick one, because as long as the miner accepts the blocks, as long as the miner accepts the transactions, then the users can choose not to care about specific softworks. So I can say, I don't want to care about check template verify stuff. I just want to accept it. I don't care. Like I said, it's like opt-true. And that's how it works because it's a soft fork. The only thing is there's peer-to-peer stuff, but that's one thing.
And so you're saying because people obviously care a lot more what goes on mainnet than goes on Signet, they'd be open to a lot of those opt-trues on Signet, and they don't really care because it's Signet.
Well,
so
no, I'm saying like if I want to try Taproot, like if I am Peter Woolley, I don't really care about check template verify. I want to make sure that the Taproot stuff works. So I tell my Signet node to only care about Taproot and not care about check template verify. Even if the Signet node, the network accepts both, I can pick one if I want to. It's a minor detail, so it's not a big deal, but like it's one of the things that that is kind of cute about Signet. You mine the miner accepts the miner has both softworks enabled, but the user can choose not to enable them if they want to. It's essentially like picking your own.
But that makes it difficult. Like, I mean, there's a reason why you can't do that on mainnet, right? Because you can't verify the chain. Like, let's say I wanted to have Segwit disabled on Signet, and so I'd have like a version of Bitcoin Core pre-Segwit, and then to experiment with, say, Jeremy Rubin's check template verify without Segwit. I know it's crazy, but you know what I mean. Like, then you're not going to be able to verify the chain, or you're going to have some of the problems with that we've seen on previous testnet resets, where people are doing different things and activating different things, and people are struggling to verify the blocks, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's you can definitely not do that on mainnet, but the reason why you can do it on Signet is because you trust the miner. The miner signs off on the block, so you know it's valid.
So the reason that you can't, so if you were trying to disable Segwit on mainnet, then if you tried to spend someone else's Segwit coins without doing the Segwit stuff, and miners accepted that, anyone could do it. And kind of if you did that on mainnet, anyone can mine as long as they dedicate the electricity to it. And so then you can kind of get different forks and whatever, but on Signet, only a couple of people can mine. So you can create those transactions, sure, but they'll never actually make it anywhere. And so as long as you've got all the miners not doing anything that would violate the soft forks, then you can treat them as enabled for as long as you like until that kind of changes. So the security, the difference in the security model of having only a few signers, where you can't have an attacker mine blocks successfully, kind of changes the scenario a fair bit.
You still want to be able to verify the chain. You still want to be able to do like the IBD process, even though like Calais or you, AJ, or both have signed off on blocks into the chain. You still want to verify that all the transactions in those blocks are valid, right? In certain use cases. Like, let's say you're doing that IBD, and you still can on you still.
Yeah, you can do it. The only thing is your node is going to see a mine block, and it's going to say, "Well, this block contains a transaction that I don't understand," which in Bitcoin land means accept. And that's in mainnet as well. It's if someone makes a transaction with Segwit version 1 and it gets into a block, or Segwit version 58 and it goes into a block, then everyone's going to accept it.
Okay, I'd need to think about
There is no Segwit version 58, it only goes up to 16.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I need to think about that. Okay. But certainly in a hard fork case, like let's say someone wanted to hard fork Signet, like it would just, I don't know, like you and AJ would just not allow that, right? And so then we wouldn't make a hard fork on Signet.
You couldn't mine many blocks because you. Go ahead.
If you were willing to do a hard fork, you could make the hard fork be, I'll change the people who sign the blocks. I mean, once you bring hard forks into it, it's kind of anything can happen.
That's true, yeah.
Okay, I was thinking before this that it wouldn't be it would be a problem, people coming with their own proposed soft fork, but it sounds like with like opt-true type stuff, it wouldn't.
So it's still, if you come in with your own soft fork, you still have to get the signatories to mine blocks that will include those transactions. So if you started mining CTV blocks today, then the miners don't have the code to verify that, and they'll consider the transactions non-standard and just ignore them. And same with the Taproot transaction right now.
And so do you see there being like a BIP-like process where it's like as part of the BIP process or part of the like soft fork discussion process, there being an application to Calais, AJ, whoever else is signing blocks to have their soft fork on Signet.
Want to take that, Ethan?
Yeah, so that's what
yeah.
I'm playing around with code to make that as straightforward as possible. And I think the way it might make sense is to have so we've got a Taproot PR in the Bitcoin repository at the moment, right? And the last modification date of that is a couple of days ago. And so I think what makes maybe sense is to say that if you merge this code and then once blocks have passed that modification date and the user passes a -enable Taproot flag or something, then they'll relay Taproot transactions to anyone else that's also got that flag set. And if there happens to be a miner on the network that's willing to mine those transactions, then they'll get mined. And I think that's all feasible and would be compatible with doing Taproot and CTV and everything else, and work with custom signets without requiring lots of configuration, but still a work in progress.
Okay.
Kind of
yeah.
Answer your question on application to get your soft fork in. I think ultimately Signet is going to be based on Bitcoin Core in a way. I'm hoping that other implementers and wallets and stuff are going to support it. But the way I see it is, if something is merged into Bitcoin Core, into the master repository, then that's going to kind of trickle down into the Signet, which maybe there's a Signet branch on Bitcoin Core, I don't know. And that would be automatically pulled and built and ran by the miners somehow. So I don't think AJ and I would sit and like take applications or anything. I mean, you don't even know if we're going to be the maintainers or run the miners, in the future. Could be anyone really, but it's more going to be like we have a code base where we have a pull request is merged, and after merging, it goes into a Signet phase or something. Kind of like how they had the Segwit testnet for a while there.
There's definitely trade-offs for both approaches, right? Like there is a downside to having that, like all like permissions, like Calais AJ, please enable my soft fork type stuff. But that does bring all the benefits of Signet with a network effect, so that everyone is using that same Signet in a way that if everyone was just splitting off and using their own Signet with their own soft fork on it and no one else is on their Signet, then there's not much point, right? You're almost just on a local Regtest type network, and you're not getting the benefits of a public network.
If you have a soft fork you want to try out, I think starting your own Signet, custom Signet, and asking people to join in is probably the most straightforward thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One thing I did see that you're not enabling, like on Testnet, you can do non-standard scripts. So like some of those op codes that are disabled on core, you can actually use on Testnet, but your plan is not to have them enabled on Signet. And what's the reason for that?
Well, ultimately people, they want to make sure that whatever they're doing is going to work with real money. So I think it makes more sense to be as close to the thing as possible and not accept things that won't be accepted in Bitcoin. That's basically the only reason. It's supposed to be as close to mainnet as possible.
But it's going to have to go like like you did we'll go on to your workshop at Advancing Bitcoin where you're like the hope is that we have Taproot on Signet before we have Taproot on mainnet, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's not much point. So like it does have to make jumps ahead of mainnet so that you can test stuff. But perhaps that bar for getting on Signet is like where Taproot is now first, like rather than like a soft fork that just comes out of nowhere and doesn't have the discussion and the review and a BIP and code as a PR to Bitcoin Core and blah, 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 blah.
I mean, there's several like problems that you have to kind of tackle when you're trying to do, test out new features with a beacon, set up, because once you turn it on, if you find a bug, it's going to be like, do we reset the chain now, or So I think AJ has been working on various ideas to make it so that you can you turn it on, but then you say, oops, we didn't actually turn it on. That was just fake. Ignore that stuff. And then you turn it on again later. And so that you can test out different stages of a feature. Even early stages, you can turn them on and see what happens. And then, selectively turn them off after you realize things were broken.
Because the problem is, if you turned Taproot on like 2 weeks ago, you would have, all the signatures for that would have been with the square version of R. And if we now change it to the even version of R, then they'd be invalid if you tried running the future Taproot rules against them. So I think you can make that work as long as you keep updating the activation date of Taproot, so that, oh, okay, all those old transactions, they weren't actually Taproot transactions at all. They were just pretend obtruse sort of things that you don't have to run any validation code over anymore. You only actually have to do the Taproot rules from this block instead of that previous block. So just going back to I think the current version of Signet does allow you to do the accept non-standard transactions.
I don't think so.
I don't think we'll ever actually mine it, but the command line just does the is test chain, which is set for true for Signet at the moment, I think.
Isn't that the require standard is, I don't know, require standard is false for Signet, I think. It's true, I mean. Double check.
Okay, maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing. Now I'm very confused.
It's in chain params.
No, it's just using is test chain, isn't it?
Oh yeah, is test chain is true, but require standard is also true. The test chain thing is for something. I think.
No, isn't F require standard a default?
I think no, I don't know. It's set to true anyway. So
I think it gets overridden in init.cpp.
Oh, okay.
If you do the command line parameter.
Oh, okay.
I think this because I claimed all the empty things that I mined, and I don't think I had to change the code to do that.
I'll have to look at it later.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then, so there, like whatever's best, there are going to be other signets, right? Like even if we didn't want them, there's going to be other signets.
Yep.
And there's reasons for having other signets, as we've kind of explored. Like, how do you separate the different signets so they don't start interfering with each other? So there's like network magic that you can set so that there's different signets. You can have different addresses beginning like SB1 and SB2, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
What else do you need to ensure that they don't impact each other?
Well, the magic, if you change, they're not going to talk to each other, and everything's going to be like the blocks. All of the network messages include the magic and stuff, so they're not going to communicate. So you're pretty good there, as long as the magic is different. So with Signet, I think you have that in your link list. There's the Genesis block is the same for all of them, which and because a lot of software hard codes all of the Genesis blocks for all the chains that they support, so it's hard to have a dynamic, Genesis block. It's harder to implement for people. So so the Genesis block is the same for everyone, but the magic changes. I think that's, I don't know. It should be enough, but you can have collisions. So.
Okay, so on that Genesis block, there was I'll share my screen once I've got these links up. There was a PR to skip the Genesis block proof of work check actually on core mainnet, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'll get it up. Can you just, I mean, I looked briefly over this. Can you explain like what the issue is and like why do we need to start thinking? I mean, this wasn't merged, this PR, but why do we want to change Genesis block proof of work check on mainnet? We just Genesis block on Signet, and like why do we want different Genesis blocks on either Signet or multiple Signets?
Well, the reason I'm not entirely sure why the Genesis blocks proof of work check skip was added before, but like it kind of makes sense in a way to not check it because it's hard coded. Like, why would you, you literally put the Genesis block values in there yourself. Like, why would you go and check them? In the case of Signet, because Signet has proof of work and because the Genesis block has to follow the proof of work rules, if you have proof of work enabled, then whenever you create a new Signet, before you had to actually also mine the Genesis block. So there was an entire like grind block command inside the Signet proposal that would turn your Genesis challenge into a block with a nonce and everything, which was just more work for everyone. You'd have to have this nonce. You have to say the Signet Genesis nonce is 1,325,000, and but that was when the Genesis block was customized, was dynamically generated for each Signet, which is not the case anymore. So I don't really have a problem with proof of work being tested now.
And what's the argument for different Signets having different Genesis blocks? Is that just an extra separation factor? Is that the upside to that?
The argument for is that you have like, say you want to try out lightning between multiple chains or something, and you want to just spin up a couple of Signets, and then you want to just try them out. If they have the same Genesis block, then C lightning and everything, they're not going to, you're not going to be able to use them out of the block because they use the Genesis block to define the chain.
Yeah.
But the argument against that is you can just go in and change the code. You can change the Genesis block if you want to try to. It's not hard to do. So, but I know that was one of the reasons why Jorge wanted to have the Genesis block be different for each Signet, because he was working on multi-asset lightning stuff. So.
Yeah, I hadn't thought much about lightning in terms of the argument what you'd need on Signet for lightning. Like, there's quite a few things where lightning influences the design of Signet.
Yeah, I have pull requests to make it possible to do various lightning stuff, but.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, cool. So that takes off the Genesis block item. I'm just going to highlight, because I'm showing my screen now, I'm just going to highlight like good resources on Signet for the video's sake. So there's your mailing list post initially announcing Signet. Then there's the Signet wiki, which talks about some of the reasons why you'd want to run Signet and some of the differences between mainnet and Signet. I think we've gone through a few of these. Yeah, so that's the Signet wiki. Then there's your talk at Advancing Bitcoin, where you have the various elevator pitches. Yeah, I think we've covered the incentive part, why there's problems with Testnet. So steps to integrate Signet testing. You just set that in C Lightning. So C Lightning has the PR I think it's merged, right? So once Signet is merged into core, you'll be able to do C Lightning experimentation on Signet, right? And so it's not, it doesn't need to
yes,
wait.
I think so. Yeah.
These Lightning implementations don't need to wait for it to be merged into core before getting it set up on their Lightning implementation.
Right.
And then they can just start using it whenever, well, whenever it's merged into core, or even before they can start using it now. Okay, so I recommend that there's a transcript of that up in of your presentation, and then in the workshop, the following day, we had the participants set up a Signet to experiment with Taproot, and because Signet isn't merged, they had to. Sorry, Signet isn't merged into core. They had to merge like SIPA's Taproot branch with the Signet branch, right? And so it'll be once Signet is merged into core, and certainly when Taproot is merged into core, then it'll be very, very easy. A lot of that like fiddling complexity goes away, right?
I mean, if Signet is merged, even if Taproot is not merged, then as soon as Peter Woolley updates the Taproot pull request, then you can just grab that and you would have Signet in it.
Okay, cool. So what was next on the list? In terms of the faucet, you have one set up. I can go to it as I'm showing my screen. Now, I used it yesterday and I was successful the first time, and then I tried to get some more. I think the message was NUH-UH on second. I think it's just said nuh-uh. So perhaps the error perhaps the error message needs to be improved. But how is that set up in terms of like to prevent people from just draining that faucet?
It's just per IP. One time per IP per day.
Okay. Oh, I managed to get some later again. Maybe it was using a different IP. Okay, so so that stops it being drained. But other people can also set up their own faucets, right? They just need to either get some Signet from your faucet, or they'd need to mine a block on Signet, and then they can set up their own faucet, and then people can get Signet from their faucet rather than your faucet.
Right. I mean, if they have the private key to sign a block, then
Or they mine a block on Signet that you sign off.
Oh yeah, right.
And then they've got Signet to give away. Okay. So that's the Signet faucet. There's a Signet Explorer. I think this is based on like the open source blockstream, like Explorer, right?
Yep.
And so that's just a normal block explorer for Signet. And then can you like, there's currently Taproot transactions on this Signet, or there is a separate Signet? No, you're shaking your head. So right, there's no Taproot transactions currently on the Signet blockchain.
No.
Right. And what needs to be done to get a Taproot transaction on the Signet chain? Is it just a case of the merging that we were discussing, or?
That's the easiest way, I think. Right.
But
I think that the other way would be to I think AJ actually has done this already, where you merge the Signet and Taproot together again, and then start up a new Signet temporary one or something. And then you can use that to do Taproot stuff today. Like we did it in February at Advancing Bitcoin. I know that Stepan Zhigniew even used it for his hardware wallet demo. So.
But there would need to be like a activation discussion on when to activate Taproot on the default Signet.
Yeah,
and then there would be a date. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And do you have any thought on this, AJ? Like, I think you thought about that more than I have.
Yeah, so there has to be some indication of at what height to start enforcing the rules, which gets into some complexity, and the complexity is ultimately that if someone changes, if there has to be changes made to the Taproot code before it's rolled out on mainnet, then the old transactions might no longer satisfy the new rules, and the new transactions that satisfy the new rules might not satisfy the old rules. And what that adds up to is that if you've enabled Taproot on your Signet server and the rules change underneath you, then that's effectively like a hard fork, and you have to upgrade, or your view of the change stalls. And I mean, I think that's probably going to be fine for testing as long as we can get like the user experience worked out, so that, okay, if you enable Taproot, you put this command line in, but then you need to keep paying attention to see if there's any changes, because then you'll have to upgrade, or everything will kind of get broken. I'm just poking at my terminal to try and push the branch where I've merged the things on somewhere public.
Okay. There was this change to the BIP recently, and this was AJ again, changing the block signing algorithm to be based on transaction validation instead of a custom method. So this is PR 947. Oh, this is the BIP PR. Can Kalle or AJ explain like what's going on here? What's the motivation for changing this?
Go for it, AJ.
What's that?
I said go for it, AJ.
Okay.
I talk too much.
Okay.
So the original code was, the original design was that it had a, it took the bits of the block that, so how do I put this? So it took the block and extracted the place where the signature would go from it, and then made a SHA-256 of all that, and then signed that. And because that's different to anything Bitcoin's done before, it needed some special signing code infrastructure added to let that happen. And that's, at least the way I think of it, is that special signing code is exactly the sort of signing code that Craig Wright was using to fake holding keys for other stuff, in that you just pass a hash into it of the message that you're claiming to sign, but you don't ever prove that you knew what the stuff was that hashed to it. And that's not a secure protocol. And there were kind of some complaints on the PR about that approach. And I think there was a similar suggestion for the Bitcoin signed message stuff, in that rather than having a new protocol for this, we've already got a protocol that lets us sign transactions, so why not reuse that? And that's what this basically is. It's, instead of just creating a new serialization for the block data and running SHA-256 over it, it instead reconstructs it into a transaction-like thing, and then just does the usual transaction signing stuff. And after a good suggestion by Peter, it's now at the point where we can convert the block into a PSBT and then just run it through whatever PSBT tools we have, so that we could even do a Signet that's signed by a hardware wallet, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So I mean, this is like moving into the conversation on like what a malicious actor could do to try to screw up Signet.
It's not really that far. It's more just, how could a malicious actor mislead you if you didn't understand all the details of what was going on in the code? It wasn't that there were bugs or an actual exploit or anything. It's just not the. It was just kind of an architectural design sort of thing, and the result of changing it means that we can then stick in other tools, so it's a little bit more flexible in practice now, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. There's nothing glaring in terms of, I mean, maybe we shouldn't discuss this publicly, but anything glaring a malicious party could do to Signet other than trying to get one of your two keys or both, like your signing keys, Calais and AJ?
Well, even without the signing keys, you can change Bitcoin Core. You can customize it so that it will ignore the signing keys, or you can. Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to modify it so that it will let you mine blocks only using proof of work. The only problem is, well, those blocks will not be accepted obviously by the nodes. But light clients, people who are using the nodes and trust them, they can be fooled by this unless they have support for the signature verification part. So one of the ideas that's been floating around is to actually move the signature into the header of the block, which means that even light clients who only download the header, they can choose to also get the signature, and then they can actually do the block validation on their own. But that's something for the future. I'm not sure when it would happen, but that's a potential attack vector, I guess. You can mine blocks even if they're not valid, and some people will accept them.
And so that would be like, I mean, it's inevitable. There's going to be certain attacks that aren't possible on mainnet that are going to be possible on Signet, just because like there's no value on it. So like, there's no motivation to do some of the more hardcore attacks that might be tried on mainnet. But yeah, like there could be like an Eclipse like attack where like your node isn't connected to like Calais or AJ's on Signet, and you don't realize that you're being fed Signet blocks that haven't been signed by Calais or AJ.
Yeah, I mean, if you're running a Bitcoin Core node, then you will check the signature and you would realize it. But if you're running a light client, then yeah, someone could fool you for a while.
I don't think we need to worry too much about that with no money on the line. It's not much motivation for an attacker to do stuff like that, I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, so then there's the PR. So like there was the initial PR that's closed. I'll get it up on screen. So this is 16411, and then there's the one that's open, the one that's currently being reviewed now, 18267. Like high level, like what, like you've been working on this for like, I don't know, at least a year or two now, Calais. Like what big changes have happened at a high level over that time? Like there's been some structuring of the PR to like make it more reviewable and like commit organization, that type of stuff. But what are the high level changes that over the last year or two?
There haven't been a lot of changes like that are, high level in that sense. The thing that I realized was that it's really hard to get people to review the code because it was kind of big and it had lots of stuff in it. And I was optimistic for a while, but then I switched. I started splitting it into different, multiple pull requests, and doing that kind of let me get more, traction with people. And AJ joined in. He, a couple of months ago, like he said, and he's been really helpful to keep me motivated and to also, nudge other people to help out review and stuff. But I think mostly it's like. It's just a matter of there being a big change and it taking a while to go, move through the process of getting into this system, I think. But it's also about generally me being bad at getting reviewers. And I'm, it's I don't know.
Certainly one of the big challenges to get review on your PRs.
Yeah.
Just observing all the PRs in the core at the moment. But there does seem to be impetus now with Taproot. Like, I mean, if we don't get, just discussing earlier, if we don't get Signet up to test Taproot, like, what is the point of Signet at all? Like, this is the perfect like when we have a surprise soft fork and we want to do testing before it could potentially activate and get deployed. So it's split now. So what's currently being reviewed is this 18267. There was a couple of steps afterwards that once that's merged, you wanted to do RPC tools and utility scripts.
Yeah.
So they aren't currently included. Yeah.
The interesting this PR here is kind of outdated because AJ's stuff with the transaction-based approach made a lot of this stuff actually obsolete. There are some utility scripts that I really want in there though. Like there's, for example, I have a script called get coins, which you run from the command line and it will connect to the faucet and get you coins, which is like, that was to me the big blocker for Testnet when I started testing it out when I was new. I was like, how do I get coins? I don't know. You just run a command line, 1-line thing, and then it just gets you coins. And now you have coins to test, send to a buddy or whatever. But yeah, there's other stuff as well. But a lot of the mining stuff, I don't know if it's ever going to go into core because you can just run custom stuff. The miners can have a different branch that is, so I don't know if any of that's going to go in, to be honest.
You mean it's important that just you and AJ are running the right software, but it doesn't really matter if other people aren't, if they're not like interested in verifying the chain?
Right. Well, I mean, no, verifying is one thing, but like mining, generating blocks and signing them and stuff, I don't know if that has to be in Bitcoin Core. Like, I mean, it would be useful if it was, and then people could just start up their own chains. But it doesn't have to be for Signet to work. So.
Okay. And then in terms of reviewing this, like it does touch consensus, but like only marginally, right?
Yeah.
I think you said somewhere that the only thing to really worry about in terms of touching consensus is that someone could like hack into your machine and turn the Signet flag on. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Like that's the only thing we've really got to worry about, because that's something that always we've obviously got to be more careful with consensus PRs or PRs that touch consensus.
Right. Yeah.
But nothing else. It's just those chain parameters.
Yeah, I mean every single change is
part.
like dependent on the Signet flag, the signed blocks flag being on or not. If it's not on, like Signet adds stuff to the consensus, it doesn't remove anything really. So, I mean, you couldn't fake Signet on a node and then suddenly it would accept invalid blocks to fool you into thinking you had money or something. But yeah, I don't know.
Cool. And then so when I tried it, it worked all fine. Like fee estimation, like obviously there's no fees, so like so perhaps like there needs to be a small, like should it be enabled that you can send a Signet transaction without setting the fee? Like I got an error message when I didn't set the fee.
I get that on the Regtest too. I don't know. Like when I start up a Regtest node and I start to try to send a transaction, I get the same error. I have to do set TX fee or something. I don't know. I think it's an odd feature, to be honest, but I guess something should be done about it.
It's just a small thing, I suppose.
Yeah,
that could be addressed in terms of not getting an error if you do that. But fees, like, I mean, anything's going to be accepted, right? Like it could have 0 fee, but as long as you or AJ sign it off, it can get in the chain.
Yeah.
Right, it can be below.
But our nodes are going to reject zero fee transactions, I think. I think that the core nodes will have a minimum 1 Satoshi per byte rule.
Okay.
In policy, I mean.
Okay, cool. Just going through the final things. So I saw Fabian couldn't join the call we were discussing earlier. He's got a Signet 2 set up with AnyPrev out and Taproot.
Cool.
Have you been discussing that with him? I don't
No,
know.
I hadn't even heard about it.
Okay, maybe that's just personal testing. We've discussed custom signets versus one signet to rule them all. Generate to address. So obviously, like with Regtest, you can just do the generate to address command because obviously, like there's no requirements on generating a block. That doesn't work for Signet, obviously, because it hasn't got the signature from you or AJ.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Nicholas Doré said he'd like that to work, but like there's no way for that command to work, right? Unless it goes via you or AJ.
Well, what he's saying is he thinks it should work for me and AJ.
Oh, I see.
Because we have our private key, so we can sign the blocks. And he thinks that generate to address should figure out that it is Signet and then go and do the signing and all this stuff under the hood. Because then he can start up a custom Signet on his side and he can generate blocks, on demand in some kind of testing network or framework, I think. I think that, I don't know.
Okay. With multiple signets, like are you gonna have different data directories, like a Signet 1 data directory, Signet 2 data directory, that type of thing? Like how is it going to be managed, like on the file system in terms of different signets?
Well, if you have multiple ones, you're gonna have to do what you do with Regtest and stuff. You have to do minus data dir equals like
okay
2 or something. Yeah.
Right. And in terms of block generation, like currently, like you have a script, I think you said in the workshop, Advancing Bitcoin, to do a block every 10 minutes. I don't know, it like churns away on the proof of work for like a minute, succeeds, and then you have a pause. Like is that gonna be the block generation script that's going forward, or like any thoughts on how that could change or would need to change?
It seems to be working fine right now. If there are any problems, we'll change it. That's like I don't really know if there's going to be problems. The difficulty is very low. But so if you put an ASIC and a modern ASIC on it, it would literally create like a couple of 100,000 blocks or something. I don't know, before it slowed down. But so how big of a deal is, I don't know. That could be a problem, and if it is, then we may have to increase the difficulty. Maybe even put an ASIC on it. I know someone said having ASICs on Signet might actually be, on like high-profile Signets, having an ASIC on it or something would make sense. I don't know. So
what could go wrong? Like obviously at the moment there's no hash power directed to it, but like let's say like Signet is being widely used and there's like a lot of people competing to bind blocks with your AJ signature.
Yeah.
Like would you and AJ or AJ like reduce would you increase the difficulty if there was lots of mining going on, just like manually, like tweak it like that, rather than
the Signet is working exactly like mainnet in terms of proof of work changes. It looks at the last 2016 blocks, and if they were mined in 10-minute intervals, it keeps the difficulty. So if we realized that we had to increase the difficulty, we would put more hash power on Signet, and then it would gradually increase. The reason why I'm doing the 9-minute pause right now is because I don't see a reason for my CPU to be spending time on mining the entire time. If I mine the entire time, then the difficulty is just going to go up until we hit 10 minutes per block, and then my CPU is just going to sit and sweat. So, but that could change, like I said, if we need to have more security other than the signatures. Someone could spam a bunch of block headers that are valid. MZ has to go. Bye, MZ.
Thanks, MZ.
Bye-bye.
But the proof of difficulty is only adjusted every 2 weeks on mainnet. So like there is still that possibility that blocks found really quickly if there was loads of hash power directed to the chain. And also, the signature just makes sure that blocks aren't found too fast, right?
Well,
there's a problem with blocks being
that no one else can mine. If everyone could mine, then
Oh, okay, yeah. So like two people could submit a block to you, and you only accept one of them because you don't want to accept two blocks within like a short period of time.
Well, I don't think people would be sending blocks to me. I think that I would just make blocks, and they would just talk to my node through the network. So my node would get transactions like normal in mainnet, and then it would just mine them. They mine transactions into blocks.
If I have an ASIC and I'm mining, and I find a block, and I need to get your signature, right? On
Yeah, right. I don't think it's going to work that way. I don't think you're going to mine blocks. You're going to just put transactions out in the network, and then eventually they're going to be mined, just like in mainnet. But if you do try to mine, then yes, you're going to have a signature in your block for it to be valid. So even if you did mine, you can't get it on the network.
And so the code also works the other way at the moment. Because of where the signature is placed, you have to construct the block first, so choose all the transactions, then you have to get it signed, and only then do you generate the proof of work after that.
Okay. So you're only starting the proof of work once you've got the signature.
Yeah.
And so you and AJ are kind of like, if loads of people are asking for that signature to start mining, perhaps you wouldn't give it to everyone in case they all find blocks within 10 minutes. Like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, if they were like, if we were to do that, then only one of them would be valid because they would all be mining on the same block. There would be one chain, and they would mine on top of it. So even if all of them found a block, then there would only be a one height change anyway. But ultimately, it's just going to be, we don't get blocks from people. We just get transactions over the peer-to-peer network, like normal, like in mainnet, and then our nodes just put them into blocks, like when you do generate to address, exactly the same thing.
Okay, but if a block is mined and then I get your signature and I find a block like 30 seconds later, do you only announce that block after 10 minutes and essentially put a 9.5 minute delay on it?
No.
No? Okay.
No, I mean, if we have a signature in a block, then we just put it out there.
Okay, so there can be blocks follow like every minute or two. Like there's still going to be that variability. Just not testnet level variability, mainnet level variability, basically.
Well, right now it's not going to be that way because I'm putting a 9-minute sleep in between every block.
But no one's
I'm
mining.
the one creating all the blocks. Yeah, no one
just
gives.
you mining.
I mean, yeah, it's just me mining. So.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, cool. So I think was there anything else you wanted to say on Signet? Otherwise, we'll have a short section on BTC Deb before we wrap up.
Yeah, well, I think I'm good. We talked for 2 hours.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've covered everything on the reading list. So let's wrap up with BTC Deb then. So, Callie, can you explain what BTC Deb does? Like, why people should use it, why it's interesting, and then we'll talk about enabling Taproot scripts on BTC Deb.
Sure. So it's a debugger. Well, it's a tool set for Bitcoin related things. It's based on Bitcoin Core code, so it has many of the classes defined in Bitcoin Core. They're also in BTC Deb, and it has several tools. The main one is BTC Deb, which you can hand it transactions or you can hand it scripts, Bitcoin scripts, and it will show you step by step what happens when you run those scripts. So as a learner, if you're learning Bitcoin, then it will be something you can use to experiment with script. And even more useful if you hand it two transactions, one spending the other, then it will show you the for a P2SH, it will show you the redeem script and how the script pub key and script sig and redeem script, how they all interact with each other, how the step by step how the system verifies that your transaction is valid or not valid. And recently, well, I think when Peter Woolley opened the Taproot pull request, I wrote code, or I wrote a version of BTC Deb that allows Taproot, and along with that, I also made a tool called Tap, which you can use to both create Taproot, TapScript inputs, UTXOs, and you can also spend them with multiple scripts and everything. So I'm hoping that can be useful for people testing the Taproot stuff, maybe even finding bugs and stuff. But yeah.
Cool. And you've got an example on I've got the BTC Deb GitHub page up at the moment. There is a worked through example where you can step through a script. I think it's a stock.
Yeah, you have to go to the, actually that example is actually in the Taproot branch, and that branch is actually outdated right now. I don't think you can actually find that document right now, but yeah, you can. Oh, you're talking about the regular. I thought you were talking about the Taproot stuff. Sorry.
Yeah, this isn't the example you've got up on the documentation isn't Taproot, but you can. You'd need the Taproot branch to be able to step through a Taproot script, right?
Yeah.
One thing I did see that you've disabled Miniscript. You did have Miniscript enabled with this. It was an old version of Miniscript, or what was the problem with the Miniscript?
Yeah, I based it on this old conceptual version that Peter Woolley, I think, or someone made. And I didn't realize until after I got it all working that it was missing a bunch of new features and stuff. And it was basically just a kind of limping version of Miniscript that didn't really do a lot. So I decided to just rip it out again and redo it. And also now that there's the Minsk thing. Exactly. So that might be actually an even better approach to go from there. But I don't know. I have to look at what he's done and how it works. It's possible that it could be a Minsk debugger in BTC Deb. I don't know.
I mean, certainly the visual, the stack visual isn't needed on Miniscript or Minsk, right? Like one of the cool things about this is stepping through the scripts, or the stack operations of the script.
Right.
But I suppose you could, if it was integrated with Miniscript, you'd get all the benefits of Miniscript with the benefits of being able to analyze the script and debug the script.
Yeah.
So that'd be cool. Okay. So let's wrap up then. Thank you very much, Callie, AJ, MZ, and everybody else on the YouTube. I'm still showing my screen. So there was Callie's tweet on successfully funding and spending a Taproot script from January. I'll go up on the screen. And then your tweet just an hour or two before this was upgrading BTC Deb to the latest Taproot branch. So you should, with that branch, be able to debug Taproot scripts, right?
And create them, yeah.
And create them.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you very much, Kalia, AJ, MZ, people on YouTube. The video will be up. We'll get a transcript up. I'm assuming you're happy to be attributed on the transcript in terms of your participation. Yeah,
of course.
Okay, cool. So wrap up. Thank you very much for joining. It's midday here in London, but thanks everyone on YouTube. Cheers.
Thank you for hosting. Well done.